So for today's video, I'm in Tallinn, Estonia. Now, the reason I'm here is because this building, what used to be this building, it was bombed during the Second World War, but this was the location of the Swiss Consulate General between the two World Wars. Now, I am researching Georges Montandon, who was an engraver for Huguenin Frères. He was listing the Swiss Consulate General here in Tallinn as his address, so he had apparently stayed there. Now, the object of his trip was to go to Helsinki, Finland, to meet with the newspaper editor of Uusi Suomi. Now, that newspaper still exists today, as a matter of fact. However, the purpose of his goal was to discuss the creation of a special medal. Now, Georges Montandon was an engraver. This is an area that does overlap with watchmaking. He is a very interesting character. I would like to provide some information about his biography and project and what he actually is known for doing. However, very interestingly, he did spend a lot of time in Russia and St. Petersburg, but he also seems to have branched out into the Baltics. And let me take you into this interesting story. So I hope you enjoy. So today we are looking at the life of an engraver. Now this person, Georges Montandon, did leave Switzerland and spend time working in Russia. And we do find him in St. Petersburg area circa 1907. Now he would spend approximately 10 years working in Russia and later the Baltics, eventually returning to Switzerland after the Russian Revolution in 1917. Now, it should be mentioned that at this period, and we are interested in a letter that he wrote in 1921 to the Finnish artist, Professor Alexei Gallen-Kallela, and we see this letter, which we will discuss later. But this is from the early 1920s, and this is not to be confused with another Georges Montandon. Now, this Georges Montandon spelled his name with the S in the French style. There's this other Georges Montandon who is much more notorious, and he is a doctor of medicine who was later involved during the Second World War with the Nazi regime, and he basically got into a lot of race theory. He was an anthropologist, but during the First World War, that Georges Montandon was a medical doctor, and he became involved in the Red Cross and basically evacuated between 30 to 40,000 Austrian and Hungarian prisoners of war on the Trans-Siberian Express and extricated them from Vladivostok. But this is a totally different Georges Montandon. That should be cleared up right away. But there are two sort of on the periphery here in Russia at the same time. So now this Georges Montandon was an engraver in Lokla. Eventually, he went to work for Huguenin Frères and Company, and he was of the branch of Montandon La Longue. So we do find him in the early days. He was involved with the company. This was an atelier of Auguste Franz Jacquard, and we do see that he has done various medals for them and coins. But in particular, he was involved with a 1911 project commemorating Peter the Great Bridge in St. Petersburg. And we do see these pieces today for sale, and they look as such. So this was his artistic work with that specific company. He also was doing other artistic work based on Old Slavic lore. One was entitled Exploits of Ivan Susanin, and this was made for a Moscow factory, the company Danilovsky Manufacturing Moscow. And we do see that he was an engraver for these silk scarves. And this is signed in Russian, E.F. Montandon. This is clearly him, however. Now, his brother may have also been traveling to Russia. This is not exactly clear, but one relative is mentioning that he had two ancestors, one of which was a grandfather who was in Russia. So now it is also interesting that George did meet his wife, Marie Montpere, in St. Petersburg. Now, her son, André Montpere, was born in 1907, and he appears to be a stepson. He would later become a watchmaker in his own right. He would work eventually in Lefebvre in Lokla. Now, Lefebvre was the company that came out of Charles-Ami Barbizot's watch company, and this company was situated across the street from Montandon Frères Lokla, the main building. So this is quite interesting how close everything is. But he would later become a virulent, this is the stepson, André Montpere, would become a virulent communist militant fighter in participating in the Spanish Civil War. He became a dedicated Marxist, and we see a lot of his writings on this nature. This is a very interesting character that he appears to have gone back to Russia many times after the revolution. But what we do know is that George evacuated his family via Arkhangelsk, then Newcastle, London, Southampton, Le Havre, and Paris. And Marie, the mother's family, did live in Paris. And her father was Victor Montpere, and he was living very close to the Paris area, around Paris, and the family was later reunited around 1920, where the stepson of George, André Montpere, continued his studies at La Chaux-de-Fonds. Eventually, he would move to Lokla then. Now, we have an interesting trail of this family here, but we do find it is interesting that after the Russian Revolution, now and George did begin working for Huguenin Frères. He seems to have been engaged in a lot of work in the Baltics, which were newly independent after the Russian Empire collapsed, and we do find him primarily, we do see him in Tallinn. He apparently did go to Finland on a trip, and he seems to have been involved in the creation of various different medals for the independence of these newly born nations. And he is associated with this medal for Lithuanian War of Independence. Now, 50,000 of these medals were produced by Huguenin Frères. And there was also the Medal of the Order of Vytautas the Great in the form of a cross and ribbon, and the Medal for the Order of the Grand Duke Gediminas. Various classes of this in the form of a star were produced between 1927 and 1930. So we do see that he was successful in his sales of these medals in the Baltics. Now, his trip to Finland, and he made this trip from Estonia, where he would have taken a ferry, but he had written this letter to this great, well-known, very celebrated in Finland artist, painter, Alexei Gallen-Kallela, who was a professor of arts, and he had met with this journalist from the newspaper Uusi Suomi, Mr. Lassila. And we see that this letter was written. This letter is retained in the Finnish National Archives, and we do find that he is signing it, that his temporary residence is the Swiss consulate in Reval. Now, Reval was the old name for Tallinn. This is what the city was called when the country received independence. So It would eventually change to Tallinn, which is what it is known today. But this building, the consulate, is situated at, or was situated at Tunnismäki number 3, and it is right across of the present-day Estonian National Library. Now, let us look at this letter, which is available on microfilm in the archives. And this is really interesting. This is dated August 11th, 1921. And we see Huguenin Frères and Company, Medailleurs. That's medallion makers, Le Locle, Suisse. So I would like to present a translated version of you, or for you, and it reads as follows. I had the pleasure, this is addressing Monsieur le Professeur. I had the pleasure during my last visit to Helsinki to meet with Mr. Lassila, an editor at the Uusi Suomi newspaper, and to admire several of your compositions through him. Following his advice, I am writing to you to present the following. Having come to Finland to promote the idea of creating an artistic medal in commemoration of the liberation and independence of your country, I have proposed this concept to various national organizations, different ministries, as well as several individuals in the artistic, literary, and journalistic fields. In this regard, I have had the opportunity to discuss it with, among others, some members of the Society of History and Geography, the Finnish Numismatic Society, represented by Dr. Tudir, and finally with Mr. Lassila. As a representative of a firm specializing in artistic medals, the Maison Huguenin Frères and Company in Le Locle, known for its unquestionable artistic quality in medal design, I have presented several projects developed by us for the purpose of commemorating Finland's independence. The idea seemed to interest the various individuals with whom I had the honor of discussing it. However, it is in the general opinion that this initiative should be proposed by a Finnish artist, endorsed and supported either by a national organization, a society, or even a ministry. For instance, the Ministry of Public Instruction or the Ministry of Fine Arts could undertake this project based on the proposal of a Finnish artist and distribute medals to students in all Finnish schools. Such a medal would serve as a reminder of the historic event of the country's liberation, and through its artistic design, promote the appreciation of beauty among children and the general population while instilling a love for their homeland. This endeavor could also be considered for charitable purposes. In Switzerland, for example, the government produced a medal that was sold with substantial profits totaling 300,000 copies by various national organizations. The proceeds were then donated to various charitable causes. A similar approach could be adopted in Finland for the project that concerns us. Assuming that our proposal might also interest you, I respectfully request your opinion on this matter and whether you would be willing to promote this idea and develop some designs for it. With your knowledge and connections in the country, you are undoubtedly better positioned than us to find ways to bring this noble idea of commemorating your independence to fruition by distributing a medal throughout the country as a masterpiece of your own design. As for us, we are ready to undertake all aspects related to the practical manufacturing, as we are well equipped for the production of large quantities. We would also be pleased to provide proposals and prices for this purpose, while naturally granting you a certain copyright on each copy produced by our presses. Enclosed, please find copies of some of the projects we have developed as reference documents. According to the opinions of those to whom I have presented them, they may not fully conform to Finnish national art. Additionally, our company will send you a few samples of our medals, from which you can assess our artistic and industrial capabilities. In the hope that you will take an interest in our proposal, we would be delighted to receive a response. Professor, accept our sincere regards. And this was signed Huguenin Frères and Co. Adresse temporaire, Georges Montandon, Consulat Suisse, Denismäki 3 Reval. So this is the individual that we are speaking of, and it is quite fascinating. This is an interesting Montandon connection with Finland, Estonia, the Baltics, and Russia in general, the former Russian Empire areas. So we do find this interesting case of this engraver. Now he's following in the footsteps of his ancestors, being involved in this watch-related industries. Now Huguenin Frères, they also had a branch that was responsible for watch production, and as a matter of fact, at the museums you'll find in Switzerland examples of these beautiful Huguenin Frères watches. They were also making this anneal process of coating of the watch cases and various different processes. But this is very interesting, and the fact that his adopted son, now they did have children of their own, but this son was adopted. This would have been before they were married officially. So this son did have some influence by the father. He went on to become a watchmaker at Le Phare, and this is quite an interesting picture of this. Now we see George active up until his death. He died in 1950. He was born in 1889. He was active in various different medal exhibitions. We do read of him being a delegate in Paris at one where their medals were basically presented for representing Switzerland. Now he was together with Roger Huguenin and various other different persons. But it's really good, and he is here at this exhibition. Find an article mentioning him as chef des services commerciaux de la fabrique, et qui fut médailleur en Russie. So he was a medallion maker in Russia up until, they say here, up until 1918. So clearly between 1917 and 1918, he was evacuating from the country as it became rather unstable. So this is just a little peek. We do find his obituary here. Monsieur Georges Montandon, mon père. He was cremated in La Chaux-de-Fonds, and domicile mortuaire was Mont 22. So this is various informations that we have on this interesting personage. And the director of the Maison Huguenin Frères and Co. also, we find their condolences in the press, Swiss press, on the announcement of his death. But let us just reflect on this medallion maker whom we can find some information, and it's very interesting. He seems to have led a very interesting life. And this is just a note for the record, and thank you for your attention.